Welcome, welcome. We are just wanted to record this thought, this conversation, this short session. And y'all that have been with me for a while know that I do this when there has been synchronicity in conversations, meaning maybe I've had that the same thing has come up in conversation. I usually do it when it's come up in conversation at least 3 times. Um, when something has come up repeatedly in conversation with different people, meaning it wasn't just me talking in conversation with a group of folks and everybody just kind of was on the same page. This is, me having 3 separate conversations with people that don't know each other, that aren't linked. In some way, somehow, this topic, this idea, this thread comes up and it's valid and it makes sense. Um, and it's like a necessary conversation to, in that moment for folks. And that lets me know that there are things that are on people's minds across the board that maybe are worth having a more open discussion. So I entitled this, the conversation was about like still needing your intuition, um, and also this sense of embodiment, right? It's just like the sense of embodiment and embodying an essence and an energy. So follow. So I've had a couple clients that just have kind of dropped in for sessions or a word or some type of oracle or like focus and insight. And the folks that have are regulars. They've been coming to me for years. They don't necessarily do all of the intensive work, but they do ongoing things. And they dip in with me for like almost like a confirmation type thing. Like, sis, I've been experiencing, what have you been seeing? Or they'll dip in with a like, you know what? I just feel like there's a word I need. Can you just kind of give me that word so I know stuff is straight? Is that like this is how these conversations have come up? Um, and one of them asked me, she's like, "Are you still like in sessions and stuff and working?" I said, "Oh yeah, I still, I have a certain amount of clients that I see, that I speak with monthly, with stuff. And the other folks, I told her, I said, they kind of come like you. Like, they're just like, hey, I need to just, check in with this and get this pulse point." And so we were talking, and I'll say this, those clients, I appreciate when they do that because that entire interaction is normally, regularly very fruitful for me too. There's always something that they feed me in those interactions as well. So when those clients come, I'm like, "Oh yeah, look, I know I'm about to get a word, or like there's going to be a blessing in there somewhere for me too." And so I'm always looking forward to it. But we started talking about just the chaos Um, and this is both community based, individual based, globally, nationally, like there's just upheaval. Um, and they were like, "Yeah, I remember when you said we would get here and now we're here." And I'm like, "I know it's such a crazy thing to physically see what you saw. It it's always mind-blowing. It's never something where I'm like, "Oh, wow, I didn't think that was coming," or like there's no doubt in it. It's just like, "Whew, my goodness." Like it's just this crazy state when you actually get there. And so we began to talk about the importance of attuning your intuition during this time and doing what you have to do to protect your energy, um and making sure that you are all right during the course of all of this. Because there's definitely this sense of things feeling out of sorts, things feeling like they're spinning out of control, um, and things just being like generally discombobulated. Like everything is it's out of whack. And the feeling is not helplessness or hopelessness. It's more about this knowing that free will has put us in a place where a lot of stuff is it's like out of your control. For the people who can see to problem solve, to fix things and address things, and I hate using the term fix, but for all intents and purposes in this conversation, um you're just sitting there and you're looking at stuff and you're just like, why are people choosing this, right? And then it also begs the question, for those of us who are go a little deeper existentially, like, why did I choose this existence, right? Because somewhere in there we chose to come on through at this time. So you're just like, wait, I chose this, so I'm supposed to be here doing something. Like, what is going on? So we were talking about that, and I was one of the clients was saying, yeah, I remember when you were saying, you know, be learn how to, intuitively figure out what's going on and discern, because there's gonna come a point where you're not gonna be able to tell what's real. And then AI, in the form that we have come to know it, hit. And people are passing around pictures, and there's whole, social media accounts that are manufactured off of AI created things, and they're giving you all of this false information that looks so parallel to the truth. And people are having a hard time discerning if they're even trying at all. There's so much of it that is being taken for face value. I'm not sure that people are actually trying to discern. They're just kind of like, oh, okay, look at this. And they just let it be what it is. And it's easy to share from that perspective. But then you also have people who are upset and feeling a way that they're using the term misled. They've been misled by ChatGPT because they're just now figuring out ChatGPT's default is to be a people pleaser. And they're using ChatGPT as therapists, to build friendships, and they've been using it with no discernment. Because at the end of the day, you're talking to a computer program and you're expecting human-like empathy, qualities, and intellect. And yet the computer program is the one that's in the wrong. This is where we are. And it started off gentle. It started off with play this game and upload your picture, and we'll tell you what your kids would look like. Play this game, upload your picture, and, we'll give you AI headshots that you can use. Play with this filter. There's been all of these soft launches to get us here. And those people who were discerning about it were told, be quiet, you're a stick in the mud, you're a Debbie Downer. You can't just let people have fun. And now there are AI programs created to create visuals where it's very hard to tell the difference between, is that an actual person? There are, I saw this report, and I may have mentioned this somewhere else in another chat, but I saw this report. This lady was she's an influencer. And a brand, she had approached a brand at some point, or a brand had approached her about, because I think she was like a micro influencer. So a brand had approached her at some point, and whatever the deal was didn't work out financially or time-wise or whatever, for both of them, on top of the fact that she said that brand didn't really align with her personal values and stuff like that. They were lowballing her, and she's like, no, this isn't my jam anyway. So the brand ends up going back, taking her likeness and creating a whole campaign with a AI virtual version of her. They dubbed her voice. They did everything. And apparently some of her followers found it, and they were coming to her page wait a minute, why would you endorse this company? This is completely hypocritical. And she's like, I didn't do anything with them. As a matter of fact, I turned them down. And then it came out, some of her followers were like, no, look over here you are. And she's like, that in fact is not me. I never did any of this stuff. And she had some intellectual lawyers go through some things, and this company had taken her likeness. And when she put the video up side by side with her talking, it was the creepiest thing I have ever seen. Ever. Because if you were just to scroll or log into something and just glance at it, maybe it's playing in the background and you're not really looking at it, it would just look like another commercial or something, just like another ad. But then if you stop and you look, you can see certain things about the way the mouth moves. It's like, oh, that looks a little off. But when you see it play side by side with her, you can see that there's no, you can tell the soul is missing, right? The soul that would actually be in a human being, if they did the ad, it's not there. But if you're looking at it by itself, you're like, something is off about this. And it was scary because she's having issue with getting them to take it down because her image as a brand influencer somehow, and I don't want to quote the legals on this, but it got caught up in intellectual property, like in like public domain kind of things, because she posted herself before online. Some way, somehow, there's a loophole in there that hasn't gotten closed because we haven't had to until now, that allows that brand company to use her likeness because it's not quite her. But it looks like her, but it's not quite her. There's like a loophole in there. And it reminds me of how they do that with music, where there's like sample and then there's interpolation and there's like certain things where it's like you don't have to pay for the sample if it is under X amount of beats per minute or something like that. Like there's a whole loophole that has been allowed. And so you look at things like that and it's like you have to be able to discern what is true and what's not. There's a whole campaign which is psychological warfare, to convince us that things like slavery and all these negative blemishes on our society as Americans, specifically as Americans, like it never existed. They're wiping out what they can from, artifacts in museums and closing down certain libraries because they don't want you to have certain books, and they're systematically getting rid of all of this stuff. But then at the same time, they're allowing streams where there's people like, I can prove that slavery never exists. I can prove nobody ever walked on the moon. There are people who are born in what I think was the moonwalk was like in the late 60s or something. And there are people who are born in like the 90s and the 2000s who are like, oh, that never happened. And enough channels and algorithms have been open to allow that to push forth versus any type of truth. Now, I'm not going to dispute either way. I'm just using that merely as an example of one of the things that's like commonly spoken on. And so I'm like telling my clients, I'm like, yeah, like this is that point where you have to discern truthfully, because there's so much chaos and there's so much clutter that our minds, I just did a post about, how to decrease the mental acrobatics, on Healing Through Sacred Writing. For a month now, we've been talking about coming home to the body, making sure that you're not so disconnected from your body, right? Because your soul needs to be in your body for grounding so you can really, really perceive your surroundings. Otherwise, you're floating and you're just kind of out there and you're not fully present enough to discern whatever is needed to be discerned. And so people are having trouble being able to use and tap into their intuition, which was another reason why I followed my prompt to start with working with people with attuning their intuition. And it wasn't a fad, it wasn't a phase, it wasn't a trend. It was for some people, but the attunement and all of that stuff needed to happen because we were going to always get to where we needed to use it. Like, we were always getting to this point where we needed to really, really use it. You don't need to try to practice it now. You need it to always be in practice. So now that the time is here, like, I don't have to do any additional steps. I'm already here. I've already been using my intuition. I've already been tapped in. I don't need to, reach back and figure anything out and, brush up on anything. No, I was already using it. And one of the things that I always taught was that we all need constant attunement, and just like we can all use a little tune up, a little time to tighten up. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being able to do that. As a matter of fact, it's necessary because, I mean, things are crazy. It's super easy to get off track with, with your intuition. You've been living. Maybe you've been parenting, maybe you've been caretaking, maybe, you've just had life stuff lifing, and it knocks you off track. It's overwhelming. Your mental is on that hamster wheel. You're doing mental acrobatics, and there's stuff where you're overthinking and you're not completely present. Maybe you have disconnected from your body, and you need to do whatever you've got to do to ground yourself and come back so you can focus. So I'm talking, in these conversations, and the point of embodiment comes up as well. Meaning, not only are we tapping into situations with our discernment and our intuition, but we're also embodying who we're designed to be, right? We're also showing up at 100% with who we are designed to be, who we've been asked to be. And that goes back to that conversation that I was having so many years ago about staying in your lane. Oh, and I got the worst backlash for that. I can do what I want to do. I can try what I want to try. I'm not just designed to be this thing, and I can go where I want to go and do it how I want to do it. Can you? Yes. And the point of that conversation that I was having all that time was never that you needed to be pigeonholed into anything. It was always that you have a purpose, and from that purpose comes so many different ways to express it. But you need to show up in what you're designed to do. So I remember saying, hey, this is a time where, if you're a lawyer, your socials, your conversation should be a direct channel. Like, people should be able to tune into your channel and hear you talking about current events that are happening from the perspective of a lawyer, of a licensed or of a professional who has studied and has paid for degrees and who has working experience, because we're going to need you guys. And I know this was at least 8 to 10 years ago that I started this conversation. And I said, we're going to need you guys to show up as lawyers, because there's going to be so much conversation surrounding things. And sure enough, what happened? You got your YouTube University folks. You got your, I know the law because my brother's broken the law 1,000 times and I got to go through the law. No, you know how to help, or you know what happened to your brother. You're not an expert across the board on all law, but you know who is? A lawyer. And we need to be informed of our rights. We need to understand how to navigate all of this stuff, right? And where are we now? We need people who are designed to advocate for us and be lawyers. We need them to do that because we're going to need them to show up. People who teach, we need you to teach because you have the understanding that people learn in so many different ways. And you, and whatever your avenue is for teaching, can help whomever. Like if you go down your avenue on how you teach and you use your gifts, the people who are attuned to your frequency of teaching will hear you and will receive, and they will branch out and do what they're supposed to do. That's how all of this works. That's why your intuition is so important. That's why embodiment is so important, because it's you showing up 100% in who you're designed to be, so you can come add to this community and this collective. It's embodiment. Does it mean that you'll be a teacher for the rest of your life? Yes, because that's part of your healing element. How you teach will consistently change and evolve. It means that you'll excel as not only a 12th grade biology teacher, but you'll also excel as a corporate trainer. Because we talk about all the time, skills are transferable. It's a thing and it's real. So, it was the conversations that I was having with women about showing up bigger and more boldly and more confidently. It was those conversations where, when I'm saying that, there are other women who are like, so you mean everybody can? And no, there are people who are called. There are people who are called to be in the foreground. There are people who are called to be a little bit more in the background. I give the example all the time. So many, your favorite singers have a voice coach. That voice coach can sing their behinds off a lot of times too, but does that mean that they have to be in the front? No, but they're propelling your favorite singer to be in the front. And that's how your favorite singer exercises their vocal cords and takes care of their instrument, because of somebody really powerful in the background. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing. Some people are supposed to be on stage and some people are supposed to do the production of the show. But guess what? The people on stage aren't surviving without the people who are doing production. There's no show without production. So everybody's got to play their part, which means that as you embody things, you show up in the most full version of yourself that is possible. That part is so important. That part is so important, that embodiment piece, because you'll go more where you're intuitively driven. You'll have less conversations that are empty, and that don't make sense. A lot of people are struggling because they're just like, this conversation isn't full. It's not satisfying. It's not filling me up. And as you embody a full version of you, an authentic version of you, you'll be drawn to places that will feed you and not feed on you. You'll be pulled to all the proper places. So but your intuition is going to take you there as well. Your intuition is going to be like, hey, like you need to be over here, or this is looking at you, or like you'll see where stuff is waving you. You'll see where stuff is waving to you. And so that embodiment piece is so important. And that's the other thing that I kind of shared with one of my other clients. I said I'm possibly a little bit more quiet, partially because I'm focused on the assignments that I've been given, because I'm trying to follow suit with that, because I've been given some assignments for some things that I have to get done for myself. But the other portion of that is that I've also been following instructions to let like I've kind of done the work that I've been told to do. I gave all of that information so early on in preparation. And that information is supposed to take us through, right? That information still exists. It's still out there. You can go back to the archives and listen to all the podcast episodes. You can go back and you can come back up here and catch up. Maybe when I released the information, it wasn't time for you to listen. It wasn't going to sink in. And then there's sometimes we got to go back and listen. Like I go back and I'm like, oh, that was a good word. Okay. That still resonates. And so that embodiment piece is, I like to call it the applied knowledge. It's the applied knowledge, excuse me, portion of the lesson. It's one thing to sit and study and memorize and read and listen. It's another thing to have to actually go out and apply what you absorbed, right? Because now here comes a space where you need to actually go live that. And that's one of the things I always did when I did shadow work and more long-term sessions with clients anyway. We would work for 6 weeks and then we take like a week off. Number one, because I don't want you getting too attached to your progress being based on talking to me. And the other part of that is I need you to go out and look at the world in a different light without me being there, so you can see excuse me, where to apply these concepts that we've been talking about. Like, where does it actually show up in your life? And when you don't have a phone call with me to link that, it's you out there on your own. I've taken the training wheels off for a second and said, go out there and ride the bike. I'm not behind you holding the bike. You've gone off and you're riding the bike, no training wheels, and I'm not standing behind you. And that part is super important. And that's where we are now. A lot of there have been a good number of, and this part came up too. One of my clients said, yeah, I've noticed that you've been quiet. And I said, I'm glad that you noticed. And and we talked about that piece. And I said, I mean, we're supposed to be, if you had done all that work with me, you should feel comfortable enough to be active in the first place, because I actually gave you tangibles. I didn't give you stuff to keep you having to come back to put money in my pocket that way, which is what a lot of the influencers have done. They have influenced, they've leveraged, they've marketed, and they've made it a point where you have to constantly come back to them to get a word or get that jolt or get that feeling. It's like having to go get your jolt from your coffee. That's what it's like working with them on certain things. And it's like, no, but then there's no healing there because you don't feel capable of doing things on your own. That's that embodiment piece. Can you go out Like once you figure out who you are, once you learn more of that lesson, once you do more of a deep dive, you should feel comfortable and capable stepping out in a fuller version of yourself. The gag is that we're always evolving at some point and we're always expanding. I mean, that doesn't mean that you're constantly having to sit with your book and learn all the stuff. It simply means that as you grow, as you age, you're going to figure out your tolerances, you're going to have some challenges, you're going to have some stuff going on that's more visible at certain times, and it's going to be necessary for you to understand how to apply everything that you've learned. And that may take time. It may take time for certain things to pop up for you. The thing is, it's like when those things pop up, are you handling it the way you used to, or with the information that you've been armed with the more, you know, upgraded, so to speak, version of you, because of that embodiment piece, which is super important right now. So why do I need my intuition in this world of chaos? Because your intuition is necessary no matter what. Remember, it's not just stranger danger. It's a way that you should encompass and navigate your whole entire life. It's the way that things are designed to be. You're supposed to be using your intuition. It's a protection, it's an armor, but it's also such a gentle guide. It's a breath of fresh air. You know, it's a strength. You should feel more comfortable using your intuition and therefore being around other people who are intuitively driven. You guys should start to be drawn towards one another, um, and finding one another in community. That's where we feel more full with things. That's where things feel more settled. And it builds your confidence. We need our intuition. We need that embodiment piece. We need to show up as this everyday, and that embodiment portion is not necessarily ritualistic where it's like, oh, I gotta light the candle every night, I gotta say this prayer all the time. No, embodiment is knowing that you are light, knowing that kindness is necessary, and showing up as that in every single space across the board, even when no one else is looking. Even when there's no reward for it. Even if nobody says whatever, even if nobody speaks to it, it's still you showing up on a regular basis in that energy. It's necessary. Does it mean, and you'll see, like I said, spirituality is no longer trendy. Thank God we're at this point. And so, people aren't I remember doing a psychic fair once, and they were saying that the people were like, what did they call them? They called them like something junkies, card junkies or something like that. And they were like, they're just people who come to these things and they like to go from table to table for the adrenaline rush. But it doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to use the information that you gave them. And so I'm grateful for this period because I had a lot of clients who came in like that. It's like, oh, I just, I want to have this session, but they didn't really want any type of change. It was just like, oh, I want to tap in for a minute. And, I don't have the kind of gifts that you could just use for fun. I've tried it before. And then all that stuff downloads and I have to say it. And it's like, oh, okay, that's not fun anymore. Like I can't play around with it. I'm really out here doing work to help heal people. And I can't control what message comes based on the healing that you need. Um, so continued embodiment. What does that look like for you? I mean, definitely you can have your natal chart completed. That's helpful. That's always helpful. Human design. I love human design. I'm not versed in it, but I've have my chart handy from online and I break down certain aspects and study it from time to time. And that's super helpful. Um, for me, embodiment has been through Reiki and my Reiki practice and yoga teaching training, yoga teacher training. That's helped me out a lot with the embodiment piece, just figuring out, how to settle into the energy that I show up in every day on a regular basis. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like every time I read some or I study some, I find myself and I'm just like, oh, yeah, this feels so much better. And it's funny because I met a fellow classmate. We were doing an alumni activity and we were talking about like various programs and stuff and we were talking about the things that we do for a living, and she's telling me where she is now in her career, but she's like, oh yeah, I worked in this part of mental health before, and we were just like talking about like some of the challenges with that and totally relating. She's super cool, super sweet. And so at one point she looked at me and she asked me, had I ever been to this one place or whatever? And I said, it was like a resting place or whatever. A place for like a serene, like calming kind of place or whatever. And I said, no, but I've heard of it. And she said, I'm gonna say this and it sounds so funny. She's like, but you look like, you know, that place. And I was like, I get it. And she's like, you probably need to teach down there or something. But it was so interesting that she called that out and she's like, you look like that place. And I was like, oh, wow. But that to me just said I was able to embody it. I'm embodying a certain energy that's necessary. And I think that's what all of this is about, embodying that, cultivating that, encompassing that energy, showcasing it, demonstrating it. Um, I think all of that piece is what's super important right now. Not the ritual portion of like doing certain things, not the performative portion of doing certain things, because a lot of stuff has been super performative. It's, do you really live this in your everyday life? And I think if more people are living things per who they're designed to be authentically and they're showing up as that in their everyday life, this is how our relationships will improve. Um, this is how a lot of things community based will improve. And once we start to link there, I think we'll see things as we can in a small grassroots way. I think we'll see things, I'll say elevate, strengthen, all those things that we're looking for them to do positively. I think we'll start to see that happen. And I think the key to that is not like a utopia type thing. It's more like we need some light in the midst of all this craziness. So how do I produce those sparks of joy? How do I produce those sparks of light? How do I produce that? Like, that's more what it's about. This is your personal journey and how you strengthen your personal journey there and ultimately make things better for yourself and the people around you, and cultivate and almost become like a magnet to other spaces that are actually good for you. So you can show up in those other spaces and pour into them as you're expecting these places, these spaces, these people to pour into you. Because all of that has to be reciprocal. But I feel like if we show up more in that space of embodiment, it's helpful. But we have to do that by starting with our intuition. And that means that despite all of the chaos and the craziness and everything going on around us, we still have to do what we have to do in our space to attune and sharpen your intuition. Let me know what part of this conversation has resonated with you. Let me know if you have any additional questions. You're able to kind of ask those questions on the post. I'll have the link to my Patreon on the post as well. The Patreon space has been women only, and that portion is going to stay that way. But Healing Through Sacred Writing is completely a co-ed space. And so I will have the link down there for you to join the Healing Through Sacred Writing community to have more in-depth conversation that is specifically tailored around these kinds of concepts. Thanks for joining me.